Awesome. So tonight we're talking about a presentation that I could not figure out the title for. So if this seems vague, it is. Basically, we're talking about templating, right? Once you start writing code, you're going to find that you're writing a lot of the same things over and over again, right? Whether that's React components, whether that's your index files, or just starting up a new project, right? There's a lot of this boilerplate is what we usually call it, that you got to get out of the way. It doesn't actually do much, but it has to be there for your language to work, your framework to work. And oftentimes, if we're writing all that by hand, we get slight variances. And you can kind of tell who wrote the code after a while, because you know, oh, so-and-so writes like this, and so-and-so does it like that, which is fine for the most part. But it makes it hard to expect what a file is going to look like. And when you expect what it's going to look like, everything looks the same. When something's out of the ordinary, it's easier to spot bug. You get more done more quickly, right, if you don't have to write all that boilerplate. So we're talking about tools tonight that can help you write better code faster. So productive patterns is what we call it. I'll let you judge if that's actually a thing. So as I said, I'm Jared Moore. I'm a senior engineer here at Weave. You can hit me up on LinkedIn, or I'm actually okay sharing this email publicly. Don't sign me up for mailing lists, please. So choose your weapon, right? We got to know what patterns we're going to use in our application. It doesn't matter what you're writing. There's probably some pattern you're going to be using over and over again. So we've got classic patterns that have been around for years, right? Things that help make our job easier, right? That we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. So here, take this pattern. Don't go alone. Don't make it up yourself. Things like the module pattern, right? If you've seen older JavaScript, this was super common. There's not public-private stuff in JavaScript like there might be in .NET or some of these other languages. And so they use the module pattern, right? You create a module, you can attach functions to it, you can attach properties to it, and then you return that out. No one can access your private stuff because it's not in scope and no one has access to that scope anymore. So you used to see this a lot with like jQuery. You used to see this with some Angular stuff. It's not super common, but it's still valid, right? People still write code like this every day. Object-oriented programming, right? This is another pattern people follow in JavaScript. You're creating objects that can do things, right? And so we repeat this code over and over again. Same thing with ifs. This was way back. Thankfully, with things like Babel and Webpack, we don't have to do this as much. It controls a lot of the scope for us, right? This is, again, dealing with the global scope problem in JavaScript. Thankfully, like, we have tools that just automatically hide a bunch of this stuff for us now, right? If you're writing in TypeScript, you get classes with properties for free. You don't have to use module patterns, things like that. Even with like ES7 or beyond, a lot of that's getting built into JavaScript. Babel takes care of that. So these patterns exist. If you're looking at old code or people who have been writing JavaScript for a long time, you're going to see those. You're probably not writing that every day, though. So we have new things for any of you Zelda fans out there. This is much better than the older games, at least in my opinion. So now we're doing things like components, right? That doesn't matter whether that's a React component, you're dealing with an Angular component, right? This isn't a framework-specific thing. Whatever it is you're doing it over and over. So Redux, right? This is notorious for tons of boilerplate. You have to set up action creators and reducers and all of this code just to get the plumbing to work. And tests, okay, not so modern. But it is code that you're repeating all over the place. So wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to write out this block of code every time you wanted to test something? Okay, that's nice. But like, how does this impact my day-to-day? So writing more consistent code, right? We talked about this, right? Like if you do it slightly different every time, you have to stop and think about how you did it last time. That's extra time you're spending. That's extra like I'm more tired at the end of the day because I have to sit and think about every little thing. That's no fun. You can actually focus on what matters, right? The logic of your application, what it's doing, rather than how you got there. You can stay in the zone, right? This relates heavily to the last point, right? Is when you can focus on what it's doing rather than all the structure of it. You see the flow, it's easier to stay on focus, or stay in the zone, right? Stay focused, whatever you want to call it. And it's going to flow more naturally. You're going to write code more quickly. And you can share coding styles, right? A lot of these tools, they live in your project. You can share them across the team. Doesn't matter who wrote the code. It all looks the same. It looks like your project, not so-and-so's code. So how do we do this, right? Like, what tools are we using for this? One that you probably heard of, especially in the React world, is Create React App, right? This does a great job of spinning up a whole brand new project. So it's going to give you even a new Git repo. It's going to go create like your package JSON. It's going to give you some basic folder structure. And similar ideas exist for Angular with the ng CLI, with the Vue CLI, Next.js. It's definitely not unique, but it is the officially supported one from the Facebook React team. And one thing that most people aren't aware you can do is you can customize how this works. So because it's the official React solution, it's pretty vague, pretty general, and it has both way too much and way too little stuff at the same time. So it'll include support for CSS modules, less Sass, CSS and JS. I think they just added a whole bunch of stuff. Then at the same time, it's like, no, you can't use Redux. You gotta add that up. So it's a little painful, but it's customizable. So they actually, you can extend Create React App, you can fork it, and they have a sub package called React Scripts. You can do whatever you want, and they're just gonna call into your package and scaffold things. They've got a defined public API, can't change that. But if you wanna change how your files get named, if you wanna add something like Redux, if you wanna install custom dependencies, you can do all that. You don't have to go maintain some starter repo on GitHub and like try and like copy it and delete a bunch of stuff every time and like hope you get it right. You can have a tool do it for you, which is great. You can do things like tweak their Webpack or Babel configs. If you don't want less and Sass and CSS modules, go delete half the stuff. It's going to be way more intelligible. And then you only have to do it once. The nice part is it's a fork. So if they come out with new features and you're like, that's cool, I want that, you just sync up your code and now you have all their new features. They're two separate packages. So you got to be careful when you're writing this, right? You want to write it in such a way that you're not going to get a million merge conflicts. That's no fun. But if you're smart about how you do it, you can minimize that. It's pretty painless to sync and get their new features. So when you're done, you can actually publish this to NPM, and then you have your own customized Create React app anywhere you want. You can do this from a private Git repo. You can even do this with a file. So if you've got like your company that has what we want our React apps to look like, you can fork this for your company, make it a private repo, and no one can access it but you. Right? You don't have to be worried if you're putting like credentials, or maybe you want to sync AWS tokens to your project so you can access your APIs or whatever. Those can all live in here, and it can still be private, and that's totally okay. So generate your project. I could talk about this more, but it's probably easier to see it. So I'm just going to use this standard Create React app. This is just npm install Create React app, just like you do for any other tutorial ever. I give it a name, and then right here, I am specifying the scripts version. This is what's going to let you use your custom template. You could specify an npm package here, right? So if you published your stuff to npm, great. You can also specify a Git repo here. Awesome. I've just got mine on my computer, so I'm just going to give it a file path to where my version lives. So I'm going to run that. And I got to clean up my old one. And this is why live demos are fun. All right, try that again. So it's going to spin up just like Create React App normally would. But I've customized this process. And so after it installs a bunch of stuff, it's going to pause here in a second. And it's going to allow me to give it more input. So it's kind of small down here, but if you can see, it's asking me, do I want to use Redux? So the default is no or false. I'm going to say, yeah, let's use that. And then it's going to carry on its merry way. And it's going to install custom packages. It's going to install Redux because I told it to. It's also going to create some new folders in my project because that's what I wanted it to do. So we're done, right? It does the standard Create React App thing. It's like, hey, here's some commands you can run to get started in your project. But let's spin this up and see what it created for me. So this whole project didn't exist, I don't know, what was it, 45 seconds ago? I've got a public directory with like my index.html, just like you'd expect. I got my source directory. Any of you that have used Create React App before, you're like, hey, that's not what your source directory looks like, right? Where's your capital A app.js? Because people want to name their files that. I clearly don't. So I have an index.jsx, right? And that's rendering my app. I also included like routes. By default, it does Create React App does not include a router. And I said, for my projects, I'm always just going to use React Router. I've made that decision. I don't want to have to make it every single time, right? I could have customized it, had it give me a prompt. I don't necessarily have to use that. That's up to you when you make your template, though. So I have routes. I have stuff like a loading component and like a basic welcome page. And right out of the box, if I click the right button, I can run an npm start. And once this builds, we should have an app. Ooh, shiny. Okay, that's not that amazing. But it no longer says edit source app.js, right? That doesn't make sense. I wouldn't fix that. But you have something that's compiling, it's working, it's running. You're not focused on all the projects set up. You're focused on what do I want my app to do. So beyond that, right, I told it I wanted to use Redux. So I got a Redux file, folder, I should say. And I know that I want to put all my actions in a directory. I also want to go set up things like the store. And I know what middlewares I want to use. And so all of this is configured. I don't have to think about it every time of like, what do I export from where and how does that work again, right? Because I do this, what, like every 6 months when I start a new project? It's in code. I don't have to think about it. I just have to generate my project and I know it works the same way as the last one did. So that, if I can get back to my presentation. Is generating a project. So beyond that, yes.
So how long did that take you to be able to actually do that?
Probably, it'd be a solid day's work, right? But most of the time, if I'm setting up a project, it's like half a day anyways. And I gotta go remember all the stuff that I forgot. So it was half a day of remembering all the stuff I forgot since I'd last done it, and half a day of actually like putting it in code so that I didn't ever have to remember again.
So did you use Create React App, move your project to the way you wanted it, and then started, like, then you forked Create React App and started doing it the way that you wanted it to? Does that make sense? So like you already made all those changes for one project and then tried to fit Create React App to fit that?
Yeah, so I had a project that I knew worked well, that I had gone and done all the manual tweaking of like, this is how I want to set up, this works well. Forked Create React App. Went in, first thing I started doing was tweaking their file templates and saying, this is what I want my project to look like. I don't want capital A app.js with a default export. I want index.js, right, with a source component of routes. That's how I want my base app rendered. So went and tweaked that, pulled all those in. Then I started adding things like, let's get fancy. Do I want to add Redux? Let's get even fancier. Do I want custom dependencies and only the right things are installed all the time so I don't have huge packages all the time? And started customizing and tweaking further and further. And I'll probably keep playing with this, but it's to a point now where it's usable. Sweet. So those kind of tools are great. I know Vue CLI lets you do something very similar. Angular CLI, not as much. You can kind of do something similar. You can like have extensions that you install to it and say, oh, do this thing or do that thing. It's not quite as freeform as some of these are. Not too many people are using Angular these days, but if you are, there you go. So that gets the project out of the way, but like that's not my day-to-day code, right? I'm still like repeating myself a whole bunch if I'm typing out every file and creating it, and I'm forgetting things like every time I want to make a component. So that's where plop comes in. So plop says they are a micro generator utility. That's mostly in relation to Yeoman. If any of you have been around long enough to remember Yeoman. Yeoman was kind of like Create React App, but 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And was not related to a specific language, right? Like you could do all this crazy custom stuff, but it was a pain in the butt to maintain. So plop is way more lightweight than that. Angular now has something called schematics, very similar. And I'll use this to generate groups of files, right? So for example, every time I want to create a component, right, I need to add a new directory inside my components. I need to go add the component file itself and like import React and create the component function and all that boilerplate that doesn't actually do anything just so I can render a component, right? I also probably need a test file. I might need a styles file, right, depending on what I'm doing. If I'm doing something like Sass, I need a styles file. If I'm doing something like CSS and JS, not so much. I probably also want an index file so I can make it easy to import my component. You don't have to guess like which of these 10 files is it. And I want it to name everything consistently, right? It's super annoying when you're like trying to use your editor to jump to a file and you're like, is this one snake case or is it kebab case? Or is this one like all one word with random capitals because so-and-so wrote it and that's how he types all his files, right? And that happens, especially when you're working on big teams and it's super frustrating. And this will just name everything, right? So you know what to expect. It's easy, it's faster to write. It's also faster to maintain in the future. So let's do that, right? We have our app here that's spun up, and instead, I am going to use, instead of going and creating a component manually, I'm going to run plop. Now, one of the things that my custom template did was it included a bunch of plop templates that I know I want to use. And so if I run plop, it's not going to find it. MPX is going to go install it and run it for me. And it gives me options. These are things that I can generate. So I can do Redux actions, or commonly we do like Redux actions that go at an API or something. And that's a pattern that we use all over the place. And so that's a plop template. We're just going to do a component. It's going to ask me for some information so that it can generate this, right? And I'm just going to say my shiny component. And then it's going to ask me what feature does this belong to. And I'm going to say this is my awesome feature. And it's going to say, okay, I spit out a bunch of files for you. And inside,
A little bit bigger.
oh, are we super tiny? Sorry. I spit out a bunch of files for you. Right, and notice this is not like any random location. It's putting these in a specific location. This is part of that predictability of my project. I decided to make this opinionated, right? I'm like, this is where my components live. This is how I should find them. Part of that's working in a bigger application, right? If you've got 5 components, who cares? Like, just throw them all in the same folder and you'll figure it out. If you've got 500, this works much better. So Inside my components, right, like it created my awesome feature. Notice that like I typed it in Pascal case, right? Or what's the other one? Title case, I think is what they call this.
Case?
No, for this one.
That one?
Yeah, right, like it fixed it. It says, for your project, the directory name should be kebab case, right, dash case. So it got it right. And then my shiny component is like, okay, that was right. So it created my shiny component in the feature. So it's organized the way I want it to be. And it created my component file, right? And it's like, oh, I got the casing on the component name right. If you try and do kebab case on your component name, JavaScript's gonna be like, that makes zero sense. I don't know what you're talking about. So I'm importing React. I'm already importing my styles file, right? So I could come here. I have something that it's applying out of the box. And I have tests, right? Like I just generated a component and I can come in here and say npm test. And Jest is gonna sit here and run through and it's like, hey, you have a test for one component and it passed, right? Like it doesn't crash. All your boilerplate's right. So if nothing else, this is great because it'll help developers write tests, right? Every time you create a component, there's already a test file. You can't forget it, right? I'm of the opinion that you should be a little bit mean and make your test file with one failing test in it. That way it won't pass your CI/CD pipeline, right? You have to go fix it. You have to look at it. Most devs here at Weave don't like that idea though. So look, you have one passing test. There you go. And I've got an index file that's exporting my component. So what did it require to get there, right? So this is kind of small. I don't expect you to actually read that very much. Don't worry, you can go look at it closer when you have the slides. So there's a config file, right? This config file is called plotfile.js, and it defines a couple things, right? I can define helpers, so I can go figure out where my source directory is, that kind of stuff. Right here, it's defining those questions it asked me, right? What's your component name? What's your feature name? And it's going to use that information to organize my code right down the line. Then I have a list of actions of things it's going to do, right? This could be add a file. This could be append to a file. So if I want to go export something from, my components.index.js, right? So I can reference everything public from /components. I can go do that. I can create an action here that'll say, go append this line to this file, or go replace something in this file. And then I have templates. So templates, yeah.
I'm just curious what made you decide to use Kebab Case? I'm not really super familiar with any practices with that. So.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of the React community prefers Pascal Case or Camel Case. Part of it is experience from other languages.
Oh.
Part of it is also experience with different operating systems. Anytime you start introducing capitals, it gets weird, right? So it is hard to read if everything's lowercase with no spaces. It's just a blob. So you're kind of left with kebab case or snake case or undercase, whatever you want to call it. And so using those for file names makes it, one, predictable, right? Everything's all lowercase and I never have to say, is this thing this? Also, if I've got a coworker who's using Windows, it's not like, oh, there's two different files that are both lowercase index.js and capital I index.js. And it's fine on his machine, but it crashes on mine. So run into that before, that's not fun. So that was, this is what we're gonna use. It works for everybody.
Yeah, we ran into that the other day too, but so it's interesting you point that out. The Git problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, common. Yeah.
So, because Git will take it, it'll be like, hey, there's two different files, that's great. And then when you try and go to Windows, which is case insensitive, it's like, you told me I have two different files, but they look like the same to me. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's like, I've seen it more evolving in the community, at least the JavaScript community, to kebab case your files. Like, it's just, for most of the stuff that I've seen now, everyone's staying away from the Pascal case just because the problems with Git and different machines and stuff. So go with the flow.
There you go. So, and then I'm also weird. As much as I really didn't like Angular, I did like a lot of things from their style guide. And so we actually name our React components very similarly to Angular components. So
The component at the end.
with the dot component .jsx, right? Or the dot component .test. It groups everything nicely. It also has an awesome benefit of it makes it super easy to use glob patterns to find. So when you want to do something like run all my test files, you can just do star.test.jsx and you're gonna grab them all. You don't have to enforce a file name. You just say, this is part of the file type, right? It almost acts like an extension and it just works, which is super handy.
Is it hard with, I mean, yeah, add another word and you're importing, but it's not a big deal, right?
Yeah, and so then like most of my components, it's like my shiny component dot component, right? It picks up the .jsx automatically, so I don't have to include that. But it's also nice because for like my Redux actions, it'll say my cool action dot action. And so it's very clear, this is a component, this is an action. Other types follow that too, and so you kind of get this context that you don't always get otherwise. So, okay, it generated all those. I guess I should ask, any other questions, comments? Cool. So it generated all those files, but how did it know how to do that? Like, how did it know what I wanted? And it used templates to do that. They live in your project, which is super cool. There's a whole bunch of different things people do with plop. I decided to put them in a hidden directory called .plop. That just lives in the project, right? And I've got like component, and here's all my templates that I use to create a component. So if I open up my plop file, you can see that I'm referencing my template file in .plop/component, component.jsx.hbs. HBS is handlebars. Any of you that have used handlebars templates before, it's all this is, right? If you've used them with like HTML renderers or things from a few years ago, it's no different. They give you some helpers, right? You put your helpers in these double curly brackets, right? Like here I'm saying, I want to take the feature and make it Kapp Case. And there's a whole bunch of these around casing. You can also go look up properties from like your package JSON. If you wanted to go get like your app name or something, you could do that. So, and then in the actual templates, right, like I just have this template that says, okay, here's kind of what I want this to look like. Shove the information you gave me, right? Name was what I named that thing, that command prompt in my prompts section in the plot file. So it says, okay, I'm going to gather all these things. These are just available to you. Go tell me where you want to use them and how. And it literally just copied this, rendered the template, and saved the file name with what I told it to. There's not a lot of magic there. It's not a big complicated framework. It's just, here you go. Drop it in place. Hence plop. So they live in your project, which is great because that means if they're wrong, if they don't work, if you decide to update your style as a team, just go fix the template and make it part of your PR. You're done. You don't have to go to another repo. You don't have to try and like update it and get everybody to update to your newest version. Like just go edit the file and regenerate your component. You're done. So that's super cool. We already mentioned you can add to files, you can edit or append to files. You can create custom actions. So if you want to get really fancy, you can write a node script and you can tell it exactly what to do. You probably don't need to, but if you really want to, you can. There's built-in helpers for casing, package JSON lookups, all that kind of stuff. To make this work well, you really want to be opinionated, right? Say, this is how we organize our code. And we're all going to agree, like, it is source, components, feature name, component name, right? That's the structure we're going to go for. And then make plot follow that. Right? Once you've agreed on it, there shouldn't be any more discussion. It's just done. It's easy. Be opinionated on your technologies too, right? If you're using TypeScript, make sure your plot templates are in TypeScript. if you're using CSS and JS, right? Include that at the top of your component file. If you're not using modules, CSS modules, don't have that be the plot template, right? It's easy just to copy and paste and say, oh, well, we're using something slightly different. And then you got to go delete that file every time. It's going to get painful. You're going to stop using the tool, right? We're trying to avoid those manual repetitions of I have to do this every time. That's killing productivity. So you also don't want to be too clever, right? You can write custom node scripts for plop, and covering all those edge cases is super hard. And it's going to break all the time, and you're going to spend more time fixing plop than you're saving by using plop. So don't be clever, just make it work for your 80% time, right? And you'll be much happier with it. So when a template doesn't quite work, right? It's like, oh, this is almost what I wanted. In this order, make sure you're following the pattern. No, really, make sure you're following the pattern. If you've agreed on this as a team, you're trying to do something different, you want to evaluate that. If you go against this, you're losing consistency. So it may really just be that the template's broken. If that's actually what it is, you're adopting a new pattern as a team or something. Go ahead, fix the template. It lives in your project. It takes 30 seconds. It's not hard. Last piece, snippets. So plop templates are great when I want to generate like 5 files, but I don't want to like run plop every time I want to write a for loop, right? I still repeat that code all the time, but it's kind of too small for like its own tool, right? So snippets are built into VS Code. This idea exists in lots of editors, right? IntelliJ products call them live templates. You've got Vim macros way back to the 80s. TextMate also calls them snippets. So chances are, if you're using an IDE, right, Sublime, Atom, whatever it is, it's got this concept. You might not know where it is. Go dig through your preferences. It's probably there somewhere. So logging is a great example of this, right? Like I want to log something out to the console. I want to put like big brackets so I go, oh, that's my thing. So there's a snippet, right? And I just type log. I type tab complete just like I would for any other IntelliSense, right? And instead of just like writing console.log, it's going to give me this whole bracket. It's actually going to place my cursor right in that parentheses, right? So I can just log out whatever I want. I don't have to worry about the rest of it, and I move on. I'm not thinking about the code structure. I'm thinking about what the code does, right? Loops, same idea. For is built into a lot of these, right? You want to set up your variable and increment it and then check it kind of thing, and then do something inside the loop. And then I wanted to like be able to run the map function on an array and do a lot of processing, right? And do like maps and filters and reduces is very much how I write a lot of my code. And this one wasn't built in. So I went and created my own snippet in VS Code, right? This is what the definition looks like. I give it a name. I tell it what languages I want this to run in. So basically JavaScript and TypeScript inside and outside of React. I have to give it a prefix, like this is what I'm gonna type for it to give me that like IntelliSense prompt. And then I have to tell it like, what's the pattern? Like, what code do you want me to put in? These $signs are placeholders. So it's gonna go to $1 first. I can type something, I'll hit tab, it'll take me to $2. I can type something else. I hit tab. $0 is the last one. That's where, when everything's said and done, the template's over, it's gonna leave my cursor there. So this one's set up that I'm gonna type ARRM, hit tab, and the first time I'm gonna give it the name of my array, do whatever my map is. I can then immediately go to the next line when I'm done, type ARRM again, and I just skip past that first one. It's gonna give me the dot, it's gonna go into the body of the function, right? All of a sudden I'm chaining those. If I don't wanna do that, I'm gonna hit a semicolon, I'm gonna move on. So if you're a little bit smart with how you do these, you can get a lot of utility, you can write more code a lot faster. Other tools, we talked about Vim macros, right? We mentioned Yeoman. This is still around. Probably don't want to use it. It's a pain, but you can do some cool stuff. On like a broader scale, this is definitely not a front-end tool, right? This is for infrastructure, but the same idea exists. And just be aware, like saying, I have a template for this thing. I want to go make my servers look like this, right? Ansible exists, and you can declaratively say, this is what it should look like, ready, run, and it'll go make your servers look like that. So same idea, much broader scale. Once you start using these though, you'll kind of want to use them for everything. And then after a little while, you're going to find out that's a bad idea. So you've got your hammer now. Don't try and use it on screws, right? Not everything's a nail. There are false patterns out there where you try and it looks similar, but it's not quite generic enough to capture it in template. It's not worth your time. Just skip them. Code reuse, right? Don't use this as an excuse to write bad code. Sometimes you just want to create a function and import it and share it. That's still a good idea. This doesn't overwrite that. And then Pareto's rule, or the 80-20 rule. Don't try and capture everything you're doing. Try and get the few things that you're doing that are taking up most of your time, right? If they're taking up 80% of your time creating new Redux actions, new React components, and you can automate that, you're going to get way more benefit than trying to automate everything. So stick to the basics. And that's all I've got.
So thinking about the snippets and stuff, so plop, it's easy to have consistent across your organization or your project.
Mm-hmm.
But snippets is a little differently. Snippets can be something that like you use on like a radar map, and that's kind of a standard thing, but it's like, I wonder if there's a good way to like kind of enforce certain patterns as well through snippets across your organization.
So a couple ways to do that. Right, like snippets come in packages, and this is actually something I forgot to mention before, right? Like you can go install the React snippets package as an extension to VS Code. And it's going to give you a whole bunch of common ones for components and whatever else. So if you're using something standard like that, just tell everyone, oh, go install this extension. That combined with things like linting rules will really help you make sure that stays consistent. You can also just define your own snippets if you really want to, right? They live in the .vs code directory in files. That can also just become part of your project, right? So you're not going to get 100% reuse, right? Like if you're using VS Code and someone else is using WebStorm, like your snippets aren't going to become their live templates. They're pretty similar though. So if you put in a little work, you can, if that's really important to you, you can put in a little bit of work and get some reuse there. Anything else?
So you went through showing how to modify the Create React app, right?
Mm-hmm.
What about other things like, say, an Express app that doesn't necessarily have that? They've got their little NPM in it that you'll run through some of the just basic. But if you wanted to build out your index and just have a few specific functions, a specific database connection, whatnot, how would you go about approaching that?
So, I mean, kind of the same idea, right? You could use something like there's generator libraries out there for that. I'm not overly familiar with what they are. I know like Next.js and Gatsby do a little bit with that because they handle server-side rendering as well. If you just wanted Node though, without all the front-end stuff, I'd have to do some research and figure out if there's one. Worst case scenario, I mean, you could do it with something like Plop, right? You can just say, here's a really big group of templates. That's my project.
One massive snippet.
Right. Yeah. Like it'll work. It's not great. I'm sure there's a better tool out there. Just might need a little Google foo to find it.
I mean, with something like Express, usually when your project starts out, at least in my case, it seems like Express is always like very simple.
Yeah.
And it's very like determined, like a lot of what you do determines the technologies that you're using. And in my case, like I've never used the same technology every time I've started an Express app because it's like, oh, there's something new and shiny, but I don't know. That's interesting though, because I didn't think about using it on like Express.
Yeah, it's just a different world coming from being a mentor in a boot camp. I wind up doing the same thing with students over and over and over again. So when I'm trying to test some new version of the code that's going, you know, being able to, usually I just pull up code samples that I've got in my own personal library, but
Yeah,
That's the idea.
for sure. So, I mean, the other thing too is if you're actively developing like an Express app, you could use plot for your your routes, right? And you're going to say, I'm going to go append the app.use in my index file, and then I'm going to go put these routes here. That would be fairly straightforward. As far as like project scaffolding, I'm not sure there. Sam?
I was just going to make a recommendation there. So there's a tool called Cookie Cutter.
Oh,
It's a
cool.
Python-based tool. It shares some of the same ideas that you've done here. You kind of lose the ability to, there's no fork, so you can't sync up later, but you kind of define your templates in your project structure, and even like a handlebar-ish kind of way. And you can have that in a Git repo. So then Cookie Cutter pull that in, walk you through a bunch of steps, and like there you can kind of have your structure. So I've used that before with some success. It was really old. I remember we used Cookie Cutter a long time ago.
I don't even remember.
It works pretty well, but you do lose some of, like you have to update it manually. It's in a different repo, which, there's some cool ideas with the Create React app here, but
Cool.
try out Cookie Cutter.
Yeah, that's a good one. So keep in mind too, right, like worst case scenario, you can write a node script that's just going to do your thing pretty quick, right? Create React app is kind of big and complicated because they're covering all these use cases. But you're just using like NPM to install stuff, right? So if you want to create a new folder, initialize a Git repo, and NPM install a bunch of stuff and create an index file, that's not hard to do in a node script. So you might just take the time to build yourself some tooling and say, if you can't find something, right, you can find something that's supported, save yourself the headache. But go write a quick script, and then if that's something you do all the time, you'll save time. Just make sure you're going to get the reuse out of it before you spend a week writing this thing you're going to use once every 6 months. Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.